Welcome back into Mining Stock Daily, everybody. Integra Resources did publish a new feasibility study for the producing Florida Canyon mine in Nevada. The after-tax NPV comes in at $601 million using base case metal prices with an after-tax NPV of $723 million using those spot metal prices. So, George Salamis, CEO of the company, good to see you. Good morning. How you been?
Good morning. I've been well. How about you? Good to be on the show again. This is what, 2 weeks in a row, maybe? Not quite.
Yeah. It's so frequent. Well, we knew this report was coming down. It was a big one. It really sets to define Florida Canyon under the Integra tutelage of what it's going to look like here for the next number of years. The study delivers its substantial increases in reserves, higher annual production, roughly $800 million after tax free cash flow. So, George, when you step back from those individual numbers, what do you think are those key takeaways, the biggest things that investors should take away from this study?
Yeah, for sure. So, you'll notice that we didn't put the NPV in the headline of the news release this morning because I think that was a bit of a sideshow ultimately and obviously there's a lot of value there, right? The NPV of $600 million relative to the NPV of when we acquired this asset 2 years ago, which was about $125 million or something like that. Substantial increase, but that's not the full story. In our minds, the full story here is the substantial free cash flow after tax that it generates, close to, $0.8 billion over the next 8 years. And that's really what's going to fund our growth here, Trevor, going forward, both DeLamar and Nevada North, and the mine itself, which is self-sustaining under this feasibility study.
Yeah. So what was the spot case did you use? Was it the $4,000 gold at the time or 4,100?
The spot case, I believe it's just over 4,000, correct?
Okay. So if we are to get a rebound in the gold price, and I think a lot of people who've watched the sector for a long time are anticipating maybe we've seen the bounce. We'll see. It's only been 24 hours since then. We'll see that. I mean, it's all bread and butter from there, huh?
Well, it's amazing that we're having to measure gold price increments in 24-hour increments, right?
Right.
But I mean, yeah, look, there's a lot of leverage on this project to gold price. Every 10% rise in the gold price equates to 25% rise in NPV, right? So there's a lot of leverage. That's just the kind of project it is. We've known that since the beginning. But there's a lot of value here in this story, in this feasibility study that we put out, right? The resource growth and the reserve growth. Reserves went up 78%. Resources went up 128%. We've increased the mine life substantially, right? When we acquired the project, I think there was a 7-year mine life. That was just about 2 years ago. And even with the depletion of the reserves that we've experienced from mining the asset or mining the ore over the last 2 years, we're at 8 years of mine life now with a substantially higher production profile. So, look, this is all good news. That the setup for this going forward in this mine is great.
You mentioned the jump in reserve growth. What was the biggest contributors to that jump? Was it just the drilling? Was it optimization of the pit? Walk us through that.
Yeah, for sure. And gold price was obviously a substantial driver of the increase in the resources and the reserves. Drilling was probably second to that one, right? It was the acknowledgement that when we acquired this asset 2 years ago, that we needed to move fast on getting a few drill rigs going out there. And so if you recall back in the day, we acquired it, and basically almost from day one, we started drilling because we knew that there were these areas that were undrilled or parts of the resource that needed to be infilled to turn resource into reserve. And so in doing that, we added a substantial amount of resource, including in those low-grade stockpiles that we highlighted in our news release that add to the story. In addition, some of the smart things that the engineering team did was they did a lot of geotechnical drilling to look at questions surrounding, hey, can we afford to get a little bit more aggressive with pit slopes, pit shell angles, not necessarily looking at the history of how they've mined that asset, but maybe doing things a little bit differently. And you'd know that if a couple of degrees makes a big difference on the amount of strip that you have to remove to get at the ore. So our engineering team unleashed the dragons on doing some geotechnical drilling and proving that we can get a little bit more aggressive on pitch shell angles, all within the realm of safety, of course. And that had a substantial difference as well. So it's not just one thing. It's not just the gold price. It's not just the drill bit with exploration. It's a myriad of things that we did to increase the resources and reserves out there substantially.
Okay. So at today's gold price, Florida Canyon generates very nice cash flow despite carrying a relatively high cost profile. And you and I have known that. And I think, George, you and I have worked together for a number of years. My job is to ask hard questions. And one of those things that really stood out was really high cost of production for the remainder of 2026. So how resilient is this operation if gold were to, say, pull back meaningfully? And what gives you the confidence that the mine can continue to generate those strong margins?
Yeah, I mean, let's not dance around that topic. Let's address it, right? The cost guidance that we put out, obviously, we raised our cost guidance, didn't change our production guidance for the year, but that cost guidance raise was purposeful from our perspective. The study was clearly showing us that if we can go faster on waste stripping, if we can go faster on making changes to the asset right now during a high cost environment, if we can move to expand heap leach pad space sooner rather than what was originally forecasted for next year, the setup for 2027 and the 8 years beyond will be phenomenal. So it was a conscious choice here, Trevor, to spend this money.
Mhm.
And yes, it hits our ASIC, but that's 2 quarters. That's not forever. As you can see, by the news release that we put out, the costs come down substantially thereafter into 2027 and 2028 and the years beyond. So yeah, it's short-term pain for sure that we have to take. There's no dancing around it. But that's 2 quarters. And then there are another
Yeah.
32 quarters after that of really solid production. We've learned a lot from what we've just done over the last 18 months, and the setup here is excellent.
Yeah. So extending that mine life by 8 years, I mean, that's a big jump to where you thought you originally had it when you first acquired the project. And I know this was just published here, George, but I got to ask, how much more juice is there left to squeeze out of Florida Canyon? Do you think there's options or ideas of
We should
exploration
add
to add
even
even
more
more
years to
years
mine
to
life.
mine life?
Yeah, I mean, just sort of taking a step back, looking at the operating history of this asset over the last 25 years. For the last 25 years, it has consistently carried 5 years of reserves on its books, right? So that's the starting point. And there's that piece plus the piece of recognizing that there are a lot of areas uh, within the mine gate between deposits, right? And I get back to kind of this asset was where this mine was mined with ice cream scoops over the better part of 25 years. The high walls, the gap zones in between, there's still a lot of drilling to be done there to connect up smaller ore bodies into one ore body. I really think Florida Canyon, for example, is basically one big ore body. It it has produced its 3 millionth ounce very recently. So there's a lot to be done there. And then outside of the mine gate as well, not a lick of drilling has been done outside of the mine gate in a very, very long period of time. And we're starting to do that this spring. So yes, there is a lot more juice to be squeezed out of this, very definitely.
So a lot of work being done by the drill bit here, George. We haven't really chatted much about the mine optimization work. But what can investors really maybe expect over the next couple of months or years that may not be fully reflected in today's numbers just based on the optimization of the plan?
Yeah, there's lots. So we set off earlier this year to look at something that looks at crushing. Obviously, in this gold price environment, given the better recoveries from crushed ore versus run of mine or to the heap leach pad, there are some obvious benefits to running more ore through that crusher, right? And so, what could our future production look like on the basis of crushing more ore? So we're looking into that trade-off studies, potentially maybe
Mm.
some enhancements to the crushing circuit. maybe bringing in a contract crusher maybe at some point in the future. What could that look like for us? We're studying those now, and obviously, give us time and we'll resolve that. But yeah, better recoveries from crushed ore relative to ROM ore. That's a big one for us that we have to continue to study here.
All right. George, over the last number of months that you and I have chatted here on the pod, we've discussed Florida Canyon really as a turnaround story. And so now we are seeing what that turnaround really looks like. And at what point does this become less about fixing inherited challenges and more about demonstrating that Florida Canyon is a longer life cornerstone asset capable of generating hundreds of millions of dollars in cash flow?
Yeah, the fixing inherited problems and issues and concerns, that's 2025 and that's 2026 when we're in the thick of it now. The
Hmm.
fleet was the really big piece here. The dealing with an old fleet with breakdowns and large maintenance overhauls on this truck fleet, that was essentially remedied by the new 785 truck fleet that we purchased. So we're hauling record tons now, without the stoppages that we've been plagued with. Bunch of other little things, access to water, for example, on site, that's been a hang up. We're working our way through those, but really that was a 2025 and will continue to be a 2026 story. 2027, all of that will be behind us, and things will look a lot better from a production
No,
perspective.
very good. All right, very good. One of the major theses driving the original acquisition of Florida Canyon was creating that cash flow capable of funding the development of DeLamar. So, does this updated study give you even greater confidence that you can advance DeLamar while minimizing potential shareholder dilution once a decision comes for DeLamar?
Yeah, it was. In fact, you can see that in the news release. I think there's a graph in there that shows sort of cumulative after-tax free cash flow from production over the next few years, which are critical years for us, right? That cash flow build up from now until we put a shovel in the ground in sometime in the spring of 2028 at Delamar. It's key. It's critical. But that gives investors a very clear view of how much cash will be built up in the treasury by that point, and then the balance would come from some form of debt to finance Delamar. That's still the aiming mark for
Hmm.
us. Taking a step back here, I got to say, this is something that Cliff has done an excellent job, and his team, they've done an excellent job on this study and getting to know this asset in great detail. Cliff says, my mission is to make Florida Canyon boring from a production perspective, boring and stable. 80 to
There you go.
90,000 ounces a year, over a protracted period of time here, stabilized, will be boring to maybe some of us, but not to him, because it becomes a real significant cash flow generator at that stage, and that's his mission,
Hmm.
and I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just turnkey. The steady as she goes. Doesn't miss a beat. But I remember last time I asked you, George, about your current valuation and how much of it was really tied to Florida Canyon versus DeLamar in Nevada North. And you basically said, well, from your eyes, the valuation is really tied to Florida Canyon. Now, if this feasibility study out now, we can potentially see the market reaction. We started to see it, as soon as the feasibility study was published, the reaction was obviously it had a little pop in gold. That's nice.
Mhm.
But what other milestones over the next year and a half do you believe will finally close that valuation gap?
Well, so what do we have on the sort of the near term horizon? We've got a lot of exploration to come, right? We've got that sort of 50,000 meters that's going to be drilled over the next 12 months here. And results will start to come in from those, both within the mine gate, outside of the mine gate area, projects like Nevada North and Delamar, which we're also drilling right now. Um, Permitting advancement results or sort of advancement from the NEPA process on Delamar. I think that's something that shareholders will want to see, and that I think will be a fairly smooth process going forward. We're still on track to get our record of decision by the Q3 of next year. So there'll be news on that. And then then there'll be the transition to Nevada North, right? We're starting that PFS study, moving the PEA to PFS. So new costs, all of our experience that we've learned from Florida Canyon over the last 18 months of moving dirt around a site, all of that will go into this upcoming study at Nevada North. That's still a great project, but again, moving it from PEA to PFS is key for us. And publishing the feasibility study report itself and all the detail that goes into that over the course of the year. Lots of catalysts coming up here.
Yeah, fair. All right, George, good to connect with you. Congratulations on this report getting published. I know it was a long time coming and obviously puts a big Integra stamp on the project now moving forward. So now all eyes are on optimization of the mine, putting this into fruition, and then also the advancement of DeLamar, obviously. And we will continue to get you tell the story along the way. So appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Yes, indeed. It puts our stamp on this project once and for all. Thank you.
Yep. Integra Resources trades on the venture with ITR and on the NYSE American with ITRG. The information presented should not be considered investment advice. Mining Stock Daily and its affiliates are not responsible for any loss arising from any investment decision in connection with the material presented herein. Please do your own research or speak with a licensed financial representative before making any investment decisions.